Thanks very much indeed for being with us. Well, Western leaders have already started planning a post-Gaddafi Libya, despite the fact the opposition hasn't won yet. But is the rebels' potential victory a done deal now, do you think? I mean, justifying the actions of NATO?
Well, I think it looks as though the Gadaffi regime is finished. We've been saying this for a couple of days, but it does look fairly decisive now. I don't think that at all justifies the actions of NATO. NATO has been involved in a lengthy bombing campaign which has killed thousands of people now in Libya on the grounds that they were protecting civilians. Actually, they were there to achieve regime change. They obviously look like they're going to achieve that, but we have to remember we've been here before. We've been here before with Afghanistan, we've been here before with Iraq, and I think the lessons from both of those, and actually the message that is even coming from many of the rebels in Tripoli and elsewhere in Libya, is that they don't want NATO there anymore, they don't want Western troops on the ground, and they want to run their own country. And I think it would be very foolish for David Cameron or anybody else to believe this really vindicates their foreign policy in terms of the war on terror.
Well, one of Gaddafi's sons made a surprise appearance despite the rebels claiming he was captured. For almost 2 days they were saying they are in control, and that also turned out to be untrue. Does that ring the alarm bells for you concerning the credibility of this anti-Gaddafi coalition?
Well, I think what it does raise alarm bells with is the way in which these issues are used very, very much politically to justify Western intervention. We had the International Criminal Court saying that they knew that Saif al-Islam Gadaffi was in custody, when clearly they didn't know conclusively that that was the case, and therefore this was being used in a political way to imply that the regime was weaker than perhaps it was at that particular time, that the rebels had made more advances than they perhaps had at that particular time. And that's a form of disinformation which really shouldn't be coming from an international institution. And this does bring to mind some of the worrying ways in which these things have been used. I personally think the intervention of the International Criminal Court, the idea that they can try Gaddafi and his family as war criminals is yet another sign of Western hypocrisy, when we have George Bush, Tony Blair and various other people responsible for the disastrous episode in Iraq in particular, who aren't indicted in this way.
So you think that Gaddafi and his sons, when they are captured, should face trial then in Libya, and there should be no foreign intervention whatsoever in their fate?
I think it is absolutely up to the Libyan people to decide what they do with Gaddafi and with anybody else that if there is evidence to put them on trial, they should be dealt with in Libya and not in The Hague or anywhere else. I feel that the whole Western intervention around this has been an attempt they were taken by surprise by the Arab Spring, and what they're trying to do is to reassert Western control here.
Sure, just to interrupt there, you say you should let the Libyan people decide, but it's quite clear, isn't it, that the majority of the Libyan people decided that Gaddafi should go. But there was no way that they could carry that out without the help of the likes of NATO. Now, I know that you're there in London. British intelligence apparently is reportedly playing a key role in this. Now, if they're playing a key role in order to fulfill the wishes of the majority of the Libyan people, what is the problem there?
Well, the problem is that it shouldn't be dependent on a foreign power. I think most people in Britain, including the British government, would have something to say if there were foreign intervention here in this country. These things become at least major diplomatic incidents. I think that we have to say that the Libyan people may have felt, many of them may have felt, that NATO intervening would help them. I think it's absolutely true militarily that they have been helped in getting to Tripoli by the air raids, but this is at fantastic cost, because it puts a Western intervention in the middle of what started up as an uprising, and that cannot be justified in any way. And we now have a situation where the whole doctrine of humanitarian intervention, which has been so discredited in Afghanistan, in Iraq, in all those places, they are now trying to resurrect this doctrine of humanitarian intervention, of liberal interventionism, which was spelt out in the the 1990s by, among others, Tony Blair. And if we go down that road, if they try to attack Syria or intervene there or anywhere else, then this will be a very, very serious situation which will lead us closer to war in the Middle East. And after all, we already have a situation where there's great tension between Israel and Egypt over the Sinai in the last few days. We know that the Saudis intervened to stop the movement in Bahrain at the same time as the West intervened in Libya, and therefore these things were connected. The lesson of history in the Middle East is that they do not need the British or the French or the Italians or the Americans or anybody else to intervene in their countries. The Arab people are quite capable of making their own decisions, and whether they win or lose, it's much better that they do make their own decisions rather than that they are dependent on France or Britain, as they will be, as this new government will be.
What do you make of the way this has been reported by the media? In fact, I'm just learning here on the wires that a journalist has indeed been shot inside the Gadaffi compound, a journalist from the Al Jazeera network. Now, of course, in the fog of war, there's so much confusion, but the way that we've been getting these mixed reports, would you blame that on journalism, or would you blame that on the mixed messages from the rebels? How do you perceive the way we're getting information at the moment from this very confused situation in Libya?
Well, I think part of the problem is a lot of the reporters are in a hotel in Tripoli, which is, and they're not going outside of the hotel. On Radio 4 this morning, we had rather a long report of the journalist was asked what it's like in the hotel, which is all very interesting, but it isn't actually telling us what is going on in the streets of Tripoli. And I applaud the very brave journalists who have tried to get this news out. I think there is always great confusion, and there clearly are different things happening in different parts of the city, and obviously the journalists will report according to what they're actually seeing, and they can't actually do more than that. So I don't blame the journalists themselves. I do blame the kind of the sort of cheap boosterism that you get from various politicians and commentators, which makes out this is all a fantastically smooth and easy process, and we're not at the end of the process. There may be many more people dying in Tripoli before this is resolved.
Lindsey, we'll have to leave it there. Thanks very much indeed for your thoughts. Lindsey German from the Stop the War Coalition joining us live there in London. Very interesting to hear your thoughts. And we're going to stay, obviously, with the developments in